Like poetry, the narrative in Star Wars rhymes. Just as Kurosawa's influence echoed all through the original trilogy, the echo of George Lucas's own creation reverberates all through the saga, from Western adventures in The Mandalorian to the deconstruction of fascism in Andor. Star Wars has embraced many genres, and it feels only right that Dave Filoni echoes the lone samurai tale as he channels his inner Lucas. My name is Ren, and this is my spoiler-free review of episodes 1 and 2 of Ahsoka. Welcome back, Star Wars fans. For many years, Clone Wars and Rebels fans have anticipated seeing some of their favorite characters and stories make the jump from animation to live action, and it only feels right it happens as Dave Filoni makes his biggest jump from directing animation to live action, as after the fall of the Galactic Empire, former Jedi Knight Ahsoka Tano reunites with a band of veteran rebels to investigate an emerging threat to a vulnerable galaxy. And as a frame of reference, as much as I love the Clone Wars series where we first met who eventually became one of my favorite Star Wars characters in Ahsoka Tano, I love Rebels even more. I love the entire crew. I love each individual character, and Ahsoka feels very much like a spiritual follow-up to Rebels. But it is just as much a seamless continuation of the story of the original trilogy and the little glimpses that we've gotten about this character and about the remnants of the Empire in shows like The Mandalorian. And in many ways, it feels like the Star Wars show we've all been waiting for. I love The Mandalorian. It is a Western show set in the universe of Star Wars. I love Andor. It's deeper, more thinking man's Star Wars. But we have been missing the serialized pulp adventure with samurai and Jedi and Sith and light versus dark that made us fall in love with the whole of Star Wars in the first place. Ahsoka is exactly that show, where as soon as it begins, you feel you're watching a Star Wars story. There's a title crawl, there's an opening in space with a ship coming into orbit, and the narrative rapidly begins unfolding with interesting setups, character dynamics, and a deeper dive into the lore that is a trademark of Dave Filoni, with the kind of storytelling that you just don't have the time to explore in the films. And so this show gives him an opportunity to continue with his storytelling sensibilities, diving deeper on the works already established by Lucas, but offering something new that for years fans have fallen in love with. And it feels like the familiar, nostalgic, but also cinematic Star Wars. So while it is in spirit a live-action sequel to Rebels, it is familiar in the ways The Force Awakens was for lifelong fans of Star Wars. And organically through character interactions and the setup of their arcs and the stakes and the threat, Ahsoka does for Rebels and itself what Clone Wars did for the prequels, where between Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith, you end one film with the start of the Clone Wars and you begin another movie with the end of it. And so there's a lot of storytelling potential to mine in between those two stories. This is what Ahsoka is. Creates stronger, more compelling creative tissue, tying Rebels to the original trilogy and tying the original trilogy to it. Because it's clearly created with the same love, thematic, and aesthetic inspirations by Dave Filoni as George Lucas created the original Star Wars. It's no surprise Filoni is the heir apparent, as Lucas's voice echoes all through the first 2 episodes. This show so far is the Jedi Samurai epic fans have been waiting for, a story of light versus dark, where Ahsoka is a haunted vigilante working in the shadows to stop the great evil of the Empire, to bring back the galaxy to under its rule. And she starts by reuniting a collection of the unsung heroes of the rebellion, Sabine Wren and Hera Syndulla. Like I said, I'm a big fan of Rebels, so seeing these characters back on screen seamlessly brought to life by Mary Elizabeth Winstead and Natasha Liu Bordizzo put a huge smile on my face. Because it not only feels inherent to Dave Filoni's storytelling sensibilities, working with an ensemble of interesting characters, all with different dynamics, damaged relationships that carry a sense of history and weight and emotion, but in and of itself feels like a recipe for great Star Wars storytelling. A group of interesting characters on the good side, a group of intriguing, mysterious characters on the bad side, where you have the late great Ray Stevenson as Balin Skull and a Sith apprentice. There's a ton of mystery shrouding these characters, and that's what makes them so captivating. And the setup in the first two episodes is fantastic. The show structures itself as a detective mystery, where in typical Star Wars fashion, two sides are searching for a MacGuffin. But what makes it compelling beyond the story having a purpose and a focus is how it's character driven, where on both sides of light and dark, we have a master and an apprentice, where interestingly, with Ahsoka and Sabine, we're shown tension, pent up frustration, and ultimately distrust between the two. Not only showing us how Sabine is very much the rebel she claims to be, but also Ahsoka is clearly not your typical Jedi. But when it comes to Balon and Shin, the two completely trust each other. They work amazingly as a team in typical Jedi Master and Padawan Apprentice fashion, which makes their whole dynamic all the more intriguing, especially what it teases and sets up between the relationship of Balin and Ahsoka. And through that, Dave Filoni does what he does best and expands on our knowledge of the Force and the rules of the Jedi and Sith and the relationship and the blurred lines between good and evil. Ray Stevenson, Natasha Liu Bordizzo, and Rosario Dawson are absolute standouts, and they kick ass. The action set pieces in this show so far are wonderful. They feel like a good middle ground between the excellent detailed choreography of the sequel trilogy and the more methodical and strategic kind of lightsaber fight that we had in the original trilogy. Ahsoka is such a badass in this show. So mysterious, very samurai like, the lone warrior traveling through the galaxy that has issues trusting others, while her Sith counterparts work as proper knights in the middle of a battle, counting on each other to have their back. And I just love seeing all these details in the fights and seeing how Dave Filoni very much brought that from animation to live action. When it comes to the visuals as well, everyone, including myself, had a lot of problems with how Obi-Wan became too reliant on the volume. This show looks cinematic. It looks big. It feels bigger. There's a scope to all the visuals, whether it be in space or Lothal or even inside ships, that feel massive. You feel transported to a galaxy far, far away in ways The Mandalorian doesn't even do it. Obi-Wan certainly didn't do it, but Ahsoka brings that feel back that is so reminiscent of watching the Star Wars episodic movies. And that's another thing. The story feels like it belongs on the big screen, but because it has more time to develop characters, to develop its world, and explore so much of the aftermath of the original trilogy and actually focus on it, we do get to see how the infrastructure of the rebellion and the New Republic actually worked post the fall of the Empire. It's not a random superficial look at how the fall of the Empire is such a major societal restructuring all through the galaxy. Ahsoka actually explore it because it's an inherent part of the story and the journey of these characters. And as I briefly mentioned before, the plot of the show calls back to a ton of Star Wars story archetypes. But to me, without spoiling anything, this show so far reminds me a lot of Treasure Planet. If you know me, that is one of my favorite movies of all time, so you bet I was very happy seeing certain influences, certain clearly inspired imagery from that film. And speaking of inspirations, speaking of Dave Filoni, man, he just knows how to tie lore together. The little brief glimpses that we get as certain elements of the Force and how it ties back to Clone Wars, to Rebels, and how he's bringing it all together, tying it to what clearly feels like a main story in Star Wars. These aren't elements that feel superficially forced into this story to be Easter eggs and for fans to know from other Star Wars they like. They feel like natural, organic integrations of important chapters of these characters' lives and a wider expansion on the Force and on the legends of the Jedi and how the entire story of Star Wars, these characters and their importance in Star Wars are all connected. If you watch Clone Wars, if you watch Rebels, you will be very satisfied. If you haven't, I think you can perfectly watch this show and be immersed, brought into it through the characters, through their relationships, and the intrigue and interest that it raises all on its own. Ahsoka is very much a part of Star Wars. It is a follow-up to many Star Wars stories we have seen before, but it is also a Star Wars story that stands on its own. So as I dive into my final thoughts on the episodes 1 and 2 of Ahsoka, it's time for you to start the conversation in the comments below with your excitement, your hopes, your theories for Ahsoka, anything and everything down there. If you want to see me talk more Star Wars, I've done a bunch of Star Wars videos. They're all up here. Or if you just want to talk more movies and TV, this is the place to be. Consider clicking that subscribe button and you won't miss any future conversations on your favorite movies and TV. So far, Ahsoka is brilliant. Episodes 1 and 2 captured the cinematic, awe-inspiring feel of the episodic movies. Grand in scope, narratively intriguing, thematically rich, and deep in character, allowing us to dive deeper into the unknown depths of the Force in classic Dave Filoni fashion. Star Wars Rebels fans, rejoice! This is the sequel we've been waiting for. Thank you so much for watching. Remember to start the conversation with your thoughts on Ahsoka in the comments below. Who is your favorite Star Wars character, by the way? Anything and everything down there. And big shout out to my channel members who always support the channel. I'll be back very soon with more videos. And so until the next one, love each other, love the movies, and may the Force be with you.